My sister announced I'd be her surrogate and forged my identity for the application. For context, I'm Sarah. I'm 28, single, child-free by choice, and honestly, I'm living my best life. I work in marketing, which is demanding but fulfilling, and I've got my little apartment, my cat, and a solid group of friends who are like my chosen family. Now, let's talk about my actual family. Specifically, my older sister, Angelina. She's 32 and has always been, well, the golden child. You know the type. Straight-A student, class president, married her high school sweetheart, and generally the one my parents hold up as a shining example of how I should live my life. Meanwhile, I was the artsy, rebellious kid who dyed her hair purple in high school and got a piercing my mom still pretends doesn't exist. Growing up, Angelina and I were never super close. It wasn't like we hated each other or anything, but we're just different. She's type A, and I'm more of a let's see where life takes me kind of person. Our relationship has always been polite but distant. Anyway, fast forward to now. Angelina's been married to Tom for like 7 years. And if you know anything about traditional families, you already know what the expectation was: babies. Lots of them. Except, no babies have arrived. I'm not gonna lie, I've always felt bad for her because I know how much pressure she's under. She's mentioned in passing that they've been trying for years with no luck, and I could tell it was really wearing on her. Meanwhile, I'm over here thriving in my single, child-free life, which, by the way, is a choice I've been super clear about with my family. My parents think it's a phase, but I've made peace with the fact that they don't get it. So, a couple of weeks ago, my mom called to say we were having a family dinner at their place. Nothing unusual there. We do these every so often, and while it's not exactly my favorite way to spend an evening, I try to show up when I can. You know, to keep the peace. It's usually me, Angelina, her husband Tom, and my parents sitting around pretending we're the Brady Bunch. This particular dinner seemed normal at first. My mom made lasagna, which is her go-to everything-is-fine meal, and we were all just chatting about work and the weather. Angelina was quieter than usual, but I didn't think much of it. Then, right as we're finishing the meal, she clears her throat and says, "I have an announcement to make." Oh boy. I figured she was gearing up to tell us about some new treatment or adoption plan. She's been pretty open about how hard things have been with trying to have a baby, and while I know it's a sensitive subject, I didn't expect what came next. She looks right at me like dead in the eyes and says, "Sarah has agreed to be our surrogate." I swear for a second, I thought I'd blacked out and missed a conversation we'd had. I just sat there frozen, while my mom gasped in delight and my dad started clapping like this was the best news he'd ever heard. Even Tom looked surprised, and he was sitting right next to her. "Wait, what?" I finally managed to say. "You're so generous, Sarah," my mom chimed in, totally ignoring the look of sheer panic on my face. "I knew you'd come around to the idea of family responsibility." "Hold on," I said louder this time. "What are you talking about? I never agreed to this." Angelina's smile faltered, but only for a second. "Well, we've talked about how much it would mean to me," she said, her tone all sweet and reasonable, like we were just having a friendly chat. No, we haven't," I shot back. "You brought it up once, and I said no." Very clearly. The room went dead silent. My dad stopped clapping. My mom's face dropped. Angelina's expression went from fake sweet to straight-up furious in about 3 seconds flat. "You're being selfish," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You know how much this means to me, to us, and you're just sitting there pretending like you don't care?" "Selfish," I repeated, my voice rising. "You made up this whole story without even asking me, and I'm the selfish one?" At this point, Tom, poor sweet Tom, tried to step in. "Maybe we should all just calm down," he said, holding up his hands like a referee about to call a timeout. But Angelina wasn't having it. "No, Tom, she needs to hear this," she said, pointing at me like I was on trial. "You've always been so self-centered, Sarah. You don't want kids, fine, but some of us actually care about building a family. And now, when you have the chance to do something meaningful, you're just going to walk away." I don't even remember what I said next. I was so angry, I could barely see straight. All I know is that I stood up, grabbed my bag, and left while my mom was still yelling something about keeping the family together. I didn't even make it halfway home before my phone started blowing up. First, it was my mom, leaving a voicemail about how I'd embarrassed Angelina in front of the family. Then Angelina herself texted me a full-on essay about how I was immature, ungrateful, and oh yeah, ruining her life. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The next few days were tense, to say the least. I didn't reach out to anyone, and they didn't stop reaching out to me. My dad sent me a long email about family obligations and how I was letting everyone down. My mom texted me a dozen times about how Angelina was devastated and how I needed to fix this. Even Tom called once, though I didn't pick up. Honestly, he's probably the only one I felt a little bad for. He didn't ask for any of this drama either. But what really pushed me over the edge was when I got a message from one of my aunts. She's one of those overly chatty relatives who's always in everyone's business, so I wasn't surprised to hear from her. What did surprise me was what she said. "Sarah, I just heard the news. You're doing such a beautiful thing for your sister. We're all so proud of you." I think I read that text 3 times before it fully sank in. Angelina had told everyone, our extended family, her friends, probably her freaking hairdresser, that I was going to be her surrogate. She didn't just announce it at dinner. She made it a public narrative, like it was already a done deal. And now, because of her, people were treating me like some kind of saint for something I never even agreed to. I was livid. And, honestly, hurt. She didn't just put me in a tough spot. She took away my ability to make my own decision. It was like she didn't care about my feelings at all, just about getting what she wanted. By the time the next family dinner rolled around, I was ready to set the record straight. I walked into my parents' house with a mental list of everything I wanted to say and no intention of holding back. It didn't take long for things to blow up. We hadn't even finished the appetizers when my mom started in on me. "Sarah, don't you think it's time to apologize to your sister?" she said, like this was all just some minor disagreement. "For what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "For not agreeing to something I never agreed to in the first place?" Angelina sighed dramatically, like she was the victim in all this. "You're being so difficult," she said. "I don't understand why you can't just do this one thing for me." "Because it's my body, Angelina," I snapped. "You don't get to decide what I do with it. And you definitely don't get to make that decision for me and then tell everyone I said yes." "You're so selfish," she shot back, her voice rising. "You've always been selfish. You don't care about anyone but yourself." At that point, all the frustration I'd been holding in just erupted. "You know what, Angelina? Maybe I am selfish, but at least I'm honest about who I am. You, on the other hand, lied to everyone about me and about this whole situation. And for what? So you could keep pretending your life is perfect." The room went so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. My mom looked like she was about to cry. My dad just stared at his plate. And Angelina? She stormed out of the room without another word. I left not long after that. There was nothing else to say. After that dinner, I thought, well, at least I've made myself clear. I wasn't expecting some heartfelt apology from Angelina or my parents, but I figured they'd back off now that they knew I wasn't budging. Spoiler, they did not. A few days later, I was at work when I got an email notification on my phone. It was from some fertility clinic I'd never heard of, which was weird because, why would I be getting emails from a fertility clinic? At first, I thought it was spam, but when I opened it, my stomach turned. It was a confirmation email from my supposed surrogacy application. I just sat there staring at my phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My name, my contact info, even some of my basic medical details, it was all in there. And the kicker? The email said they'd already scheduled my initial consultation. I immediately called the clinic, trying to stay calm and not completely lose it on the poor receptionist who answered. "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. "I just got an email about a surrogacy application, but I didn't submit anything. Can you tell me what's going on?" The receptionist sounded confused, but polite. She pulled up the record and said, "It looks like the application was submitted online a few days ago. Is it possible someone else filled it out on your behalf?" Oh, I knew exactly who it was. I asked her to cancel the consultation and remove my information from their system. Then I hung up, sat in my office chair, and just stared at the wall for a solid minute. I wanted to scream, cry, punch something, anything. How could Angelina do this? It wasn't just manipulative. It was straight-up identity theft. By the time I got home that evening, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. I called Angelina, and to my surprise, she actually picked up. "Hey," she said like nothing was wrong. "Don't hate me," I snapped. "Did you use my information to apply for surrogacy on my behalf?" There was a long pause, and then she sighed. "I knew you'd overreact," she said, like I was the one being unreasonable. "I was just trying to help move things along. You're going to say yes eventually. So what's the big deal?" I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life. "The big deal," I said, my voice shaking, "is that you stole my information and did something completely illegal. Do you even hear yourself right now? This isn't just crossing a line, Angelina. It's blowing right past it." She tried to argue, but I hung up. I didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. Instead, I called a lawyer friend of mine to ask what my options were. She told me I could file a police report for identity theft and fraud, but she also warned me that it could get messy, especially since this was a family matter. Messy or not, I knew I had to do it. If I let this slide, what was stopping her from pulling something even worse? The next morning, I went to the police station and filed the report. It felt surreal, like some kind of bad Lifetime movie. Angelina was my sister, for crying out loud. How had it come to this? A few days later, I got a call from my mom. She was hysterical. Apparently, the police had contacted Angelina, and now she was facing charges for fraud. My mom was begging me to drop it, saying I was tearing the family apart and that I needed to think about Angelina's future. "Are you kidding me?" I said, cutting her off. "She's the one who tore this family apart when she decided my life didn't matter as much as her wants. She did this to herself." My mom started crying, so I ended the call. I felt horrible, but what else could I do? I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into backing down. The fallout from filing that report was immediate. Angelina wasn't just furious. She was devastated. My mom kept calling me, alternating between guilt-tripping me and begging me to fix this before it's too late. My dad, who's normally the quiet one, even left me a voicemail saying, "You've made your point, Sarah, but you're putting your sister's future at risk. How far are you willing to take this?" How far was I willing to take this? Honestly, I wasn't sure. It wasn't like I wanted Angelina to go to jail or anything, but I also wasn't about to let her walk all over me. Then, out of nowhere, Tom called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Sarah," he said, sounding more tired than angry, "can we talk? I think you need to know what's really going on." That stopped me in my tracks. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Can we meet in person? Please. It'll make more sense if I explain it face to face." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop later that evening, and let me tell you, I was not prepared for what he told me. Apparently, years ago, before they got married, Tom and Angelina had a long, serious discussion about kids. He was upfront with her. He didn't want them. Ever. He'd even had a vasectomy before they met, just to make sure there wouldn't be any surprises. According to him, Angelina had been totally on board. She said she didn't want kids either and was perfectly happy with a child-free life. But somewhere along the way, she changed her mind. She started bringing it up a few years ago, Tom said, stirring his coffee absently. At first, it was little comments here and there. Then it turned into full-blown arguments. She kept saying I tricked her into agreeing to something she didn't really want. I just stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "So, all this talk about infertility was a lie," he said flatly. "We never tried to get pregnant because it's not physically possible." I told her I wasn't reversing the vasectomy, and she lost it. I guess that's when she started coming up with this whole surrogacy idea. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All these years, Angelina had been spinning this elaborate story about how she and Tom were struggling to conceive, and none of it was true. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. Tom sighed. "I didn't want to throw her under the bus. I figured she was just processing things in her own way. But when she started dragging you into it, I knew it had gone too far. Too far didn't even begin to cover it." I went home that night feeling like I was living in an episode of Maury. My sister had lied to her husband, to me, to our entire family. And for what? To save face. To guilt-trip me into giving her something she couldn't have otherwise? But here's the kicker. The real bombshell came a few days later. A few days later, my mom called me again. By this point, I'd been ignoring her non-stop messages, but I figured I should at least hear her out. Maybe she was finally ready to apologize, or at the very least, admit that Angelina had gone too far. Spoiler, she wasn't. Sarah, she started, her voice shaky but determined. I need you to come over. There's something you need to know about your sister. I almost laughed. Oh, you mean besides the fact that she stole my identity to file a fake surrogacy application? Or that she lied about being infertile? Sarah, please, she interrupted. This isn't about the surrogacy. It's more complicated than that. Just come over. Please. For me. Against my better judgment, I went. I told myself it was only because I wanted to give my mom one last chance to explain herself. But deep down, I think I just wanted answers. If there was even a slim chance I could make sense of this mess, I had to take it. When I got to my parents' house, my mom was alone in the kitchen, wringing her hands like she didn't know where to start. Where's Dad? I asked. He's out, she said quickly. This is just between us. For now. Okay, now I was nervous. My mom's not exactly the keep a secret type, so whatever she was about to tell me had to be big. Sarah, she said, sitting me down at the table, there's something I need to tell you about Angelina. No kidding, I muttered, crossing my arms. What now? She hesitated for a moment, then blurted it out all at once. Angelina's pregnant. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. What? She's pregnant. My mom repeated, her voice trembling. She didn't want me to tell you, but I thought you should know. She's about 3 months along. I blinked at her, trying to process what she'd just said. How? Tom got a vasectomy. Unless... Oh my God. My mom looked down at her hands, not meeting my eyes. It's not Tom's, she said quietly. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. You've got to be kidding me, I said, my voice rising. Are you telling me she cheated on Tom? After all this crap about wanting a perfect family, she went in. She was desperate, Sarah, my mom interrupted, her voice breaking. She thought this was the only way to make things right. Right? I snapped. She thought cheating would make things right? Are you even hearing yourself? That's when the full weight of the situation hit me. Angelina had spent the past few years lying about her infertility, manipulating me into being her surrogate. And now she'd gone and gotten pregnant with someone else's baby? This wasn't just desperation. This was unhinged. Who's the father? I asked, already bracing myself for whatever nightmare answer was coming. My mom hesitated again, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. It's someone she works with, she admitted finally. A man named Mike. She said it was a one-time thing, but I didn't even let her finish. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled over. I can't do this, I said, grabbing my bag. I can't keep playing along with whatever this is. Sarah, wait. My mom pleaded, grabbing my arm. She's scared. She doesn't know how to face Tom, and she doesn't know how to face you either. She needs your help. I shrugged her off. She needed my help? She should have thought of that before she destroyed her marriage and dragged me into her mess. I stormed out of there, my head spinning. Angelina was pregnant, with another man's baby, and somehow, I was still the villain in this story because I wouldn't sacrifice my life to clean up hers. After that conversation with my mom, I went full no contact with my family. I blocked Angelina, muted my mom's texts, and ignored every attempt they made to rope me back into the chaos. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't letting them drag me into their drama anymore. It was their mess to deal with, not mine. But of course, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. It was about a week later when I got a call from Tom. I almost didn't answer, but honestly, a small part of me was curious. I figured he wanted to yell at me or beg me to drop the charges against Angelina or something. But when I picked up, he sounded calm. Too calm. Sarah, he said, I thought you should know. I left her. I sat there for a second, stunned. Wait, what? Angelina told me everything, he said. About the baby, about the surrogacy, about lying to you and the rest of the family. All of it. I packed my things and moved out yesterday. I didn't even know what to say. Part of me felt bad for him. He didn't deserve to be dragged into Angelina's web of lies. But another part of me felt relieved. Like maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of the end for all the chaos she'd caused. I'm so sorry, Tom, I said finally. I had no idea it was this bad. It's not your fault, he said. Honestly, I should have seen the signs years ago. She's been so obsessed with this idea of the perfect family that she completely lost sight of reality. And I let it happen because I didn't want to rock the boat. But after everything she's done to you, I couldn't stay. Not anymore. We talked for a while after that. He told me he was planning to file for divorce and that he'd already told my parents he wasn't going to be part of the family anymore. Apparently, my mom had tried to guilt trip him too, saying things like, "Angelina just made a mistake, and you can work through this if you really love her." But Tom wasn't having it. He was done. And honestly, hearing that gave me the strength to be done too. The next time my mom called, I finally picked up. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that I was done being the scapegoat for Angelina's bad decisions. I said I wasn't dropping the charges, I wasn't going to be her surrogate, and I wasn't going to let them guilt me into fixing a situation I didn't create. "Sarah, she's your sister," my mom said, her voice cracking. "Family is supposed to stick together. Family doesn't manipulate each other and steal each other's identities." I shot back. "If you want to keep enabling her, that's your choice. But I'm out." And with that, I hung up. It's been a few months now, and things have mostly settled down. Angelina ended up taking a plea deal, which kept her out of jail, but left her with a hefty fine and a permanent mark on her record. She's still pregnant, but as far as I know, the father isn't in the picture. My parents are still trying to pretend everything's fine, but I've kept my distance. We talk occasionally, but it's surface-level stuff. Nothing deep, nothing personal. As for me, I'm doing okay. Better even. Cutting ties with all that toxicity was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the best decision I've ever made. I've learned a lot from this whole mess. Mainly that boundaries are non-negotiable, and you can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm.